Brett Butterfield, and I want to talk to you about how to get started with reading Shakespeare and how to enjoy it and get the most out of your experience of studying it. And I decided to do this myself. I think that the three most important works in Western civilization are going to be Shakespeare, Greek mythology, and the Bible. You really need those in order to have cultural context and references, and our culture is really built off of those to a large extent. Now, to study them can be really challenging because they're written with old language and old styles, and if you're unfamiliar with the stories, it can just be really difficult. But I approached Shakespeare head on, and I feel like I was able to develop some really effective strategies. And I'm just a normal person. I'm not an English major, literature major. I haven't, so I feel like these are strategies that anyone could apply and be really successful with using them. So focusing on Shakespeare, why is Shakespeare so important? And I remember in high school they read us that paper about all the vocabulary and the idioms and things that Shakespeare gave us. But it's what they didn't tell us is that Shakespeare defined humanity. And I was challenged by my mentor to get into Shakespeare. He said, Brett, there are two types of people in this world. There are those who've studied Shakespeare and those who haven't. And I knew I wanted to be in the first category. And so if you are able to read and understand Shakespeare, then you can have a much better understanding of human nature. Okay? So, how do you get started with studying Shakespeare? He wrote, there's 38 plays that are compiled into his main work, which is called the First Folio. And when I first started this challenge, I was like, all right, well, I got to start with Hamlet, right? That's like the big play. And I got a copy of Hamlet, and I sat down with my girlfriend to read it. And I did not make it very far. I found it extremely difficult just to dive into and read. You see, Shakespeare was a playwright, and there's somewhat of an argument, is Shakespeare meant for the page or the stage? And I don't really see how people can argue that it was meant for the page. He was a playwright. And so I think it really helps to see productions of Shakespeare done. And it's where you get started with that is I'd recommend getting just on Amazon Prime. There's a lot of BBC and a lot of different Shakespeare productions. A lot of them you can watch for free. Other ones you can pay for a few dollars. If you really want to dive into it, one of the subscriptions you can get along with your Amazon Prime or separately is called Broadway HD, and so it has a lot more Shakespeare plays. And you're going to be barraged by Shakespeare plays because these plays have been done over and over again. There's lots of different versions. So how do you know which one to choose? Well, you could go on Rotten Tomatoes and they'll have ratings for the different plays. That's one way to get started. It's not the best way necessarily. You can't really go wrong anything that has Laurence Olivier and Kenneth Branagh. Those are two of the most famous Shakespeare actors. And there's many more, but those two are certainly very well known. Amazon Prime also has a lot of documentaries about Shakespeare, so you can just really dive into that as much as you want. Now, another way that you might determine which play you're going to watch is if you want a full, unadulterated bard experience. Some of these plays are going to be 3.5 hours long. Now, my first time jumping into it, I wasn't ready for a 3.5 hour long production, so I chose the 2 hour long production. Okay, so you can have the same play. You have an abridged version, then you have the full version. So you jump in whatever level you're willing to play at. But even then, watching a production, I still found it very challenging to understand what was going on. This is a 16th century. These are 16th century plays, and the language is over 400 years old. and they lived completely differently than us, and I still found it very challenging. So I got an app, and I'll make it easy for you. It's called Shakespeare, the Shakespeare app. Okay, and this app has all the plays and has summaries of each scene. So is what I would do is I would sit down to watch one of these productions on TV, and I would have the app, and I would read a summary of the scene before I would watch it, so I would have an idea of what was going on in the scene. And maybe I didn't understand who the characters were, so you can go and you can look at who the characters are. Now, one thing about Shakespeare is it's okay if you know the end of the story. Everyone knows that Romeo and Juliet are going to die. Shakespeare tells you that at the beginning of the play. So it can be good just to get a little context in some of these summaries even before the scene. And you're just going to be enriched by the scene and the words and the way it all comes together itself. Okay? You can also read the dialogue if you're wanting to read along with it or read the scene afterwards. It's all there in the app. You can upgrade if you want, and you can get even better. I never got the upgrade, but it's available. Okay? So you've got your production, you've got your apps, and you really have to start, in my opinion, by just watching these plays, watching the productions. But then you really kind of have to make sense of them. And again, I'm not an English major. I didn't really know, I didn't understand all the writing tools and that kind of thing. Well, there's another app that's available for you that has some really great tools. And so this app is called the Greatest Courses app, and this is another subscription. And you can watch as many courses as you want. And what these are is they'll get world-class professors who are the experts on certain subjects, and they'll have them teach essentially a college-level course. Now, there's not homework assignments, but you can take, there's 3 different Shakespeare courses. And each one has a little bit different focus, a little bit different angle or emphasis. And so my favorite one was just how to read and understand Shakespeare. I'd say it was kind of the most entry level, but it also gave you some really great tools. And it's probably the one that I would go back and listen to again. I really liked the professor. There was another one that was a little bit more technical, got really into some nitty-gritty details. It's called William Shakespeare, Comedies, Histories, and Tragedies. And then there was a third one that was also very good that was just called Shakespeare Tragedies. Tragedies aren't, I felt like they're kind of hard to wrap your head around. Why are we writing these tragedies? So I got a lot more clarity about why these tragedies were such a big part of playwright history and so forth. Okay, so those courses can give you a lot more understanding. They'll help you to understand what is a history, what is a comedy, what is a tragedy, and what are the tools used in each one of them, what to look for, and how to get the most out of the plays. These are by people who've dedicated their life to studying Shakespeare, essentially. Now, I think something that can really give you a lot better understanding of Shakespeare is understanding the history. And it just so happens you can learn about Shakespeare's time. You can learn the history of Shakespeare by reading Shakespeare, because Shakespeare wrote 10 different history plays. Okay, and most of them were leading right up until the time that he was alive, when Queen Elizabeth was the ruler of Great Britain, or of England, I should say. And so I think understanding history get you a lot better idea of what was going on, how to understand Shakespeare, and so the plays are there. Now, if you want to go a level deeper, you read those or you watch those Shakespeare plays. Oh, and by the way, I'm aware of one production that did eight of the Shakespeare history plays in a row. So there's Richard II, Henry IV, Part 1 and 2, Henry V, Henry VI, Part 1, 2, and 3, and Richard III. And this one production did all 8 of those in a row. So you get a lot of the same cast, you get continuity, and I think that can be really nice instead of trying to get it all from different productions. So that's called The Hollow Crown. And they had some big actors. They had Tom Hiddleston as Henry V, and one of my favorite actors did an incredible job was Benedict Cumberbatch. He was Richard III, and it was really great. It was one of the things I enjoyed more than any of the other plays. But if you're wanting to go even a little bit deeper with history, there's another course from the Greatest Courses, and it's a history of England from the Tudors to the Stuarts. Well, the Tudors were in power at the beginning when Shakespeare was first started writing, and the Stuarts were in power by the time he died. And so that course can give you a lot of context, and it'll really tell you a lot more about the history plays too, so they work really well together. And if you really want to go all out, I got really into the history, and I really enjoyed a lot of the history of England and Great Britain, Europe. So they have Foundations of Western Civilization 2, a history of the modern Western world, and then I'm going back even further and listening to Foundations of Western Civilization 1 right now, which talks about the Greeks and the Romans and so forth. So I feel really accomplished, and I feel like I understand a lot more about Shakespeare, and that it's something that's enriched my life, and that I enjoy going to, I've been to a few live productions now, and I can see myself going to some more Shakespeare festivals and watching. It's not something that I'm done with. It's something I've gotten to start, and I think it can be really a lifelong study, just like the Bible or Greek mythology. I mean, you can really just go deep with that. But the more you put into it, I think the more you'll get out of it. And so I wanted to share with you these tools that have really helped me, and hope that they'll help you also.